When most people picture the American Revolution, they imagine neat lines of redcoats marching into musket fire. But up in the Green Mountains in 1775, land that will later become Vermont, it looked nothing like that. It looked like neighbors with grudges waving muskets in one hand and eviction notices in the other. We're talking about Ethan Allen and his Green Mountain Boys. To patriots, they were frontier heroes. To Loyalists, and especially the New Yorkers who wanted to grab that land, they were violent troublemakers. Either way, they weren't waiting around for Congress or George Washington to hand out orders. Their revolution started early, and it was personal. The trouble started back in 1764, when the Crown ruled that New York, not New Hampshire, controlled the territory we now call Vermont. Overnight, farmers with New Hampshire titles were told, you have to repurchase your land from New York. Ethan Allen and his followers responded with a simple motto: we will defend our property and possessions with our lives and fortunes at the expense of our blood. Translation: nice paperwork, New York. Too bad it's worthless to us. The Green Mountain Boys made their point by chasing off New York surveyors and sheriffs. And when a Loyalist doctor named Samuel Adams, not the famous one in Boston, kept stirring up trouble, they tied him to a chair and hung him from a tavern signpost in Arlington. Nothing says you're not welcome here like being displayed as colonial yard art. By 1775, intimidation turned into outright bloodshed. At the Westminster Massacre that March, New York sheriff and his men opened fire on a crowd of protesting settlers, killing 2 of them. The Green Mountain Boys answered with fury. Loyalists begged Governor Tryon of New York for help, calling Allen's men a lawless mob who put themselves in array against the king's government. Allen's response dripped with disrespect. In his own words, Yorkers were nothing more than enemies to liberty and Vermonters. By the fall of 1775, this wasn't Lexington and Concord. It was more like a family feud with tricorns. Patriots raided barns, borrowed cattle, and ran Loyalist families out of town. Loyalists struck back when they could, torching property or reporting their neighbors to British officers in Canada. Unlike Boston, there were no uniforms to separate friend from foe. That man firing at you from behind a stone wall, he might be your cousin, your old neighbor, or the guy who you saw in your pasture last year. The feud might have stayed local if Allen hadn't gone big in May 1775, leading his Green Mountain Boys with Benedict Arnold and seizing Fort Ticonderoga, delivering the Patriots their first artillery haul of the war. Allen announced the victory in his trademark humble style. In the name of the great Jehovah and the Continental Congress. All right, subtle he was not. But even as Patriots cheered, the feud at home raged on. By year's end, many Loyalist families had fled north to Canada, leaving behind burned barns, broken fences, and grudges that would last long after the Revolution ended. If the Revolution was supposed to unite the colonies, the Green Mountains prove otherwise. Sometimes, rebellion didn't just split empires. It split families, towns, and neighbors who would never speak again. A civil war inside the war. And if you'd like to hear more of these raw, unpolished truths, the scandals, the quarrels, and the courage that shaped our revolution, please subscribe below, and I'll make certain the next chapter reaches you first. I remain, as ever, your faithful correspondent, Mercy Otis Warren.